Hi, I'm Mag, and Anime Vanguards has just released, so I know a lot of you want to know what units should work on first and what not. So me, a top 10 leaderboard player in Anime Defenders and Anime Adventures back in the day, want to give you the best character rankings possible. So this tier list will, I hope, help you out a lot. I also got help from another top 10 player called Solo, so shoutouts to him. We'll leave his channel in the description. So now, onto the tier list. Alright, so here is the tier list, and we have these tiers right here. We're going to be starting from tier D, and as you can see from the selection below, I have excluded every rare unit. I would avoid even using rare units because they're so bad. None of them bring anything of value, so I thought it wouldn't even be worth ranking them. D tier, I would say, are units that aren't really worth using at all, but if that's all you have, I mean, it is what it is. It's better than using rares. And we start with Gara. He's pretty bad. All that he does in his passive is lower his SPA, and since his damage is really bad, lowering the time it takes to attack doesn't help that much. Next is Shinji, which all that he does is increase his damage up to 50% after 5 waves, which again, when the damage is so low, increasing it by a percentage doesn't really matter that much. You're better off using just other units. And to end off the tier, we actually have Zenitsu, which can be a not terrible unit, but all that he does is every 8th hit, he does 200% more damage, which, I mean, when the unit doesn't do much damage to begin with, again, that doesn't really matter much. You can probably beat the first area with these units on normal, but after that, I would recommend not using them anymore. Next up, we go to tier C, which aren't great units, but if that's all you have, it is better than the units in tier D, and you probably can beat Act 1 of Namek on normal, and it won't be that terrible. First, we start with Killua, which, unlike the units below, actually has 2 passives. He lowers his own SPA when he enters a frenzy, and when he is in frenzy, he has a 50% chance of stunning. The reason why he's so low is that there are units that actually stun that isn't a chance. He has a 50%, so I thought that he should be low like this. After that, we have Genos, which also has 2 passives, unlike the units under. He does burn, which is cool and all, and also every time he attacks, he lowers his own SPA, so long as he keeps attacking. The damage isn't great. I think that you have a much easier time beating the first level with Genos than any other unit we've talked about before, but he's not amazing either. And then I have what I think is the best epic in terms of DPS, but I could be wrong. The thing with epics is that, yeah, I played with them, but it's not like I tried. I didn't max level them, I didn't roll traits on them, but I did try them quite decently on the test server. It is Piccolo, which every 6 hit, he does 150% damage. The way this works, it seems like he actually does it every attack. Every time he attacks, you see a plus 150% damage on top of his head. So I don't know if each attack counts as 6 hits. In any case, he does a good amount of damage for an epic. So in terms of helping you beat the story, I think he is the best in terms of DPS for the epics. Continuing tier C, we actually have legendaries. I think the worst legendary in the game, and maybe this is wrong for very specific situations, but I think it's Grimmjow. No, one of the goats. How can they do this to my boy? He just does more damage to overshield, and then he does more damage consecutively if it's attacking the same enemy. In very specific situations, I can see that being very good, because it seems like he's uncapped in that second part where he keeps increasing damage when he attacks, but his range is terrible, so the enemy is gonna get out of his range very soon. It's not like it's that crazy, considering how bad his range is. And then I think the second worst legendary is Goku Black. Again, how can they do this to Goku Black, bruh? In theory, this is very cool what he does. If a mob has under 20% HP, he has a 20% chance of one-hit KO them, so long as it's not a boss. But the thing is, it only works in story mode, which I think takes away so much out of him. And the second part, he does increase his own damage, but when the damage isn't great, you know, that doesn't really matter. The fact that his first part of the passive not work outside of story is just very unfortunate. But again, if you are doing story, he might be a decent option. Moving on to tier B, these are characters that aren't like amazing, but they're useful. And being useful, I think, puts them above everyone under. Let's start with Kakashi, the epic Kakashi. The reason why I have him on B is because similar to Killua, where he can stun, Kakashi actually has a 100% chance of stunning every 8 seconds. He goes into this like frenzy, sort of like Killua, but he guarantees stun every time he attacks instead of being 50%. So I thought that's a lot more useful than having a chance of stunning is actually guaranteeing to stun. After him, I have Inosuke. He does bleed. He's the only bleed unit in the entire game, which is why I have him in B. It's very unlikely you actually need this, but bleed as far as I'm aware, cancels healing. There are stages with the healing modifier if you go on challenges and stuff like that, so it could be useful for you, but to be honest, the reason why I didn't put him on the supports tier was because I don't think it's that great. I don't think he will actually need to ever do this. The healing that happens the most is you kill an enemy and that enemy heals the boss, and that's a lot more troublesome, and you cannot stop that from happening. So useful, but not amazing. After him, I have Gon. The reason why I have Gon up here is because after 6 attacks, he actually has a 100% chance to dodge, and dodging is very good because bosses attack you and stun you. So after 6 attacks, having a guaranteed chance to dodge is decent, and for each unit around him, he gets 10% attack. So he doesn't build up like the other characters, but in the beginning of the battle, if you spam units, he can be very strong. I'm more looking at that dodge and thinking that could be useful for some players. It's not after the mid game when you get mythics, you're probably never going to use this character, but in the beginning, if you're struggling with a boss that stuns, he could be helpful. Next, I have Itachi. All that he really does is burn, which isn't great, but he does not only burn, but he also increases the damage on the enemies that he burns. So his DPS is decent for a legendary. Nothing amazing, he just has decent DPS for a legendary. Again, there, you're gonna instantly replace this guy once you get a mythic, but you know. Now I think the best legendary in the game, in terms of DPS, is actually Kizaru. For a new player, if you're trying to beat the story, I think Kizaru is very useful. He is immune to boss stun for 10 seconds and has a 10-second cooldown. Kind of like Gon, if you're stuck on a boss and the reason why you're stuck is because you keep getting stunned, I think Kizaru can be useful, and he attacks very fast, which I think is very, very helpful for beating early story. So as an early game unit, I think Kizaru is very, very useful. Now, every unit that we talked about up to this point are all characters that you're only going to use as a brand new player. Every single one here. After here, this is when we're going to be talking about characters that are actually good. So for the farms and supports tier, the only farm we have in the game right now is Speedwagon. So you don't have a choice. You have to use him. You need him. He is the actual only farm in the game right now. There will definitely be more, don't worry. But I mean, as it is, his money could be better, but I mean, you don't have a choice. So it is what it is. As a support, we actually have this unit. I don't know her real name. I was just gonna call her in-game name. Haruka Rin. She is a damage and range support for these like faster runs. Because Speedwagon doesn't give you much money, I never get the opportunity to actually use this unit, but I'm assuming for like longer content once we get that, and for, you know, infinite runs, this is a very, very useful character. You get up to 36% damage because you can place 2 of them. I assume they stack. If not, then 18%. And 10% range, or 20% if both stack. So it's a good support, actually. And you get her from the battle pass, by the way. For free, you don't have to buy the premium, I'm pretty sure. Next, we have the, I would say, best legendary in the game, which is Peng. He does repulsed, or repulsing, which is essentially pushing the enemies back. Every time he attacks, he pushes the enemies back, and once he does that, he actually gains 40% range, because his range is actually really bad on placement, but after he does 1 repulsing, his range gets pretty decent. So as a support, allowing you to survive, he's actually very good. This is a unit you might actually want to bring for actually late game stuff. Same thing with Crocodile, or Alligator. He is a slow, and he's the only current slow in the entire game. So yeah, I actually personally bring him for everything. Everything I do, I bring this unit because he's just so useful. The slow is very strong. It's 50% slow. So those were the supports. Now we're going to A tier, which, as you can see, all the units we have left are either mythics or secrets. So the A tier are units that are very good. You're going to be using these for challenges, and for legend stages, which is the late game of the current game. A tier, you have no problem bringing these for that harder content, but they do fall short a little bit compared to the units in S and SS tier. And I'll explain why there's an SS later, by the way. So the first, and I think worst mythic in the game currently, is Vegeta. The reason why is his passive, right? He has SPA minus 20% if the only units in range are Vegeta. That can be good in very specific situations, but not allowing any character to be around him is very terrible. Not allowing any slows to be around him, not allowing a buffer like Haruka Rin to be around him, that's just bad. And then his second passive is 100% more damage when hitting one enemy. Again, this could be good when attacking a boss directly, but very unlikely. It's more likely than not you'll be attacking multiple enemies. So Both of his passives are incredibly specific, and I just think that he's a very annoying character to use personally. Also in the A tier, we have Naruto. He just got nerfed, I would say. He used to be a lot better, but the devs just nerfed him. So now what he does is, after not attacking for 4 seconds, he lowers his SPA by -5% up to -15, which is cool and all. And his second passive is he increases damage by up to 36%. He used to be like immune to stuff, and they just removed that from him. I don't know if that's because they wanted other characters to have that and it was like less original. I don't know, but he was a bit better. I'm surprised they changed him, or maybe he's better now with all these number changes, but I think he looks worse. In any case, he does hit very hard, but he's just not as good as the units in S tier. Now for the last unit in A tier, we actually have Obito. He is a very good mythic actually. He applies burn, and once 4 waves have passed since placing, he decreases SPA by up to -12%. The thing is, he just doesn't cut it in comparison to the units in A and SS tier when you're looking at what the other units provide. Like, his damage is decent, but that's about it. And that's pretty much what you can say about all these A tier mythics, is that their damage is good, and that's something, but they don't provide much else. Now we step into the S tier, and these are meta units for sure. Very, very great units, starting with Sasuke. So Sasuke, he always stuns. Every time he attacks, he stuns. So he's a stun unit. And when he attacks a stun unit, he does 50% more damage. Also, every time he attacks an enemy, so long as it's the same enemy, he increases his damage by +2%, and that's uncapped. Now, we said that, for Grimmjow, for example, that wasn't very good because his range is terrible. For Sasuke, he doesn't have that issue. So when he attacks, he keeps attacking the boss over and over again. He's stunning the boss. He's doing more damage to the boss because the boss is stunned, and he keeps increasing his damage. So he's actually a very, very strong unit for defeating very strong enemies like bosses. So Sasuke is very, very powerful for that. I think right now in the game, there's no activity where you're really gonna make good use out of this unless you're doing leaderboard runs. It's a very specific activity, right? For legend stages and challenges, you don't even need all that. But keep in mind, this character is going to age better than characters that just do damage. Next in S tier is actually Chine. She is so great. She has built-in crit. She does, is it 35% crit chance against bosses? He has herself more crit damage than other units, and she guarantees to dodge every time a boss attacks her, which is so good. And once she dodges, she essentially counters with 65% of her damage. The biggest thing that puts her apart from the SS units, and the reason why she's not in SS, is actually her damage isn't crazy. Her passive is amazing, and she has the crit and she has the dodge, but the damage itself that she provides isn't crazy. Oh, the range also is really good. Her range is immense. So this is a very, very good unit. I think personally, of the units that I have, she's my favorite unit to run on legend stages because her range gets so crazy. She attacks all the enemies at once, and she dodges stun. She's just so good. It's actually a shame. I really wish I could have put her in SS tier, but the SS units are like so much better than every other unit in the game. It's actually crazy. I would say the S tier units are very good. The SS units are overpowered. The first of these is Jinwoo. The reason why he's overpowered is not his first passive, which increases damage by 40%. As we saw with a lot of these characters, they have passives that increase damage or lower SPA. What really makes him crazy is after Evo, he can summon up to 15 enemies you kill and 5 more shadows that kind of scale with his attack. It essentially makes him an uncapped unit. Because you can summon enemies that he kills, and by the way, he has, I think, the highest DPS in the game, just straight up. You can keep on summoning every 60 seconds shadows. He's the unit that lasts the longest in the game. If you're trying to be number 1 in the game, the unit you're going to take for your leaderboard run is Jinwoo. Also, every time you do a summon and the summon kills an enemy, you get more damage on top. I don't know how they multiply the damage, so I'm assuming it's actually a pretty crazy multiplication. Also, he serves as a support unit because he also buffs Igris, which is also a very overpowered unit. Igris is immune to stun, which, as we discussed previously, is very strong. He does increased damage against bosses. He does more damage and gets more range whenever a shadow shows up in his range, which is a summon from Jinwoo. So these two units pretty much gotta be played together. And sorry, I don't have any gameplay of Igris or, as we'll talk about later, the other secret, because I haven't gotten them yet. Unfortunately, I'm trying. So I'm gonna have to ask like a YouTuber friend if I can use their gameplay or something and put it on screen. But yeah, Igris and Jinwoo work almost like a pair. And when they're together, they're insane, but they're also insane separately as well. If you just have Jinwoo, that doesn't take away from him the fact that he works really well with Igris. I will say, Igris kind of does want to have Jinwoo, but chances are if you have Igris, you have Jinwoo. Jinwoo is a much easier unit to get than Igris. So yeah, very, very overpowered characters. Then last but not least, we actually have the Banner Secret, which by the way, if you don't know how to acquire him, he is from the regular banner. You just have to summon and he has a minuscule chance of actually dropping. So earlier, I actually lied. I said in those cases, the only bleed unit in the game, and I hope you picked up on that. It's a lie. He also bleeds, but chances are you're never gonna get him. So I wouldn't worry about having him. But if you do have him, congrats. He bleeds, so he's gonna stop that healing I was talking about with Inosuke, which happens. Like, healing stages are, I think, the hardest stages to beat, but more because of the enemies when they die, they heal the boss. He also increases damage to enemies that are bleeding in his range. He is a full AoE unit with pretty good range, by the way. His DPS is crazy, and he increased damage based on the ghoul stuff. I'll be honest, because I don't have him, I'm not sure how good the ghouls are. Those are summons, sort of like Jinwoo. He also does summons, but I'm not sure how good these summons actually are. Jinwoo's summons are very strong. They scale with his attack and they're very, very strong. I'm not so sure about his summons. I'm assuming they are good. The biggest thing is that the summons also increase his damage. So he has full AoE, bleeding, like high DPS, and that's his whole gimmick. But yeah, this is the tier list, by the way. If you do want a screenshot of the tier list, I mean, I guess you can screenshot the screen right now, but I'll leave it in the description as well. And if you want to make your own tier list, there will be a link in the description too, with the tier list, you know, not arranged. You can just do whatever you want with it, with all the pictures. If you have any suggestions for any character moving, you know, you can leave in the script in the comments. I will say there's been a lot of misinformation with units I've seen on Discord. A lot of people think Vegeta is very strong, which is crazy because he's the worst mythic. So I'll say I do believe in the feedback I got much more than random people on Discord. That's all I'm gonna say. Anyways, that's it.